Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War news update for the 8th of May 2023. Let's get straight to our opening gambit, which is the Russian losses as according to the Ukrainian General Staff for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. I find these indicatively useful, and they've certainly been giving us a sense of what's been going on over the past few weeks in terms of the Ukrainians trying to hit certain pieces of equipment. 540 liquidated personnel, that's down from the last few days. 7 tanks, 5 APCs, that's there or thereabouts. 7 tanks is a little bit higher. 5 APCs is a drop. 8 artillery systems, that's definitely less than there have been, or fewer artillery systems than there have been, but that is still significant. We have seen a really high number over the last few days, and those artillery systems are definitely taking a hit. The Russian artillery systems, 42 drones, and I'll explain that in a second. There was a big drone strike last night. 6 vehicles and fuel tanks, 4 pieces of special equipment. So I think down across most categories there. 4 pieces of special equipment is still useful. As you can see, there's less than 1 a day there over the course of the war, and we're seeing 4 or 5 on a daily basis at the moment, which means that the Ukrainians really are making concerted effort to take out things like radars, electronic warfare installations. They could also be things like trench diggers and deminers. So that's a wide-ranging category, and it's hard to know exactly what's been taken out. But I would think that would be ahead of the coming counteroffensive. So it'd be things like electronic warfare systems. Okay, just to try and build a picture of how those figures are obtained and whether they are accurate. Trent Telenko says stuff like this is why Ukrainian reports on Russian KIA rates are credible. More Russians are dying on camera for Ukrainian battle damage assessment than has happened in any war in human history. Western intelligence officials are having a hard time accepting this reality. And he refers here to David D, sometimes refer to myself. I've just watched about 100 to 120 Russians die tonight from just a few drone videos. This is the death of a nation, getting killed and not even being able to shoot back. The fact that he has seen 100 to 120 Russians die just on a few pieces of drone footage is something I can verify. I have seen some shocking footage. And yes, you could argue this is happening on both sides, but from what I understand, there is a plethora of drone footage of Russians dying. I've seen, as I've said before, I've seen trenches literally full of Russian soldiers. I've seen fields littered top to bottom with Russian soldiers. Prigozhin himself the other day showed a field, and he was raging. A field of, yes, they were all laid out for the photo op, but there was like 60 Russian soldiers there, dead. Incredible. And Trent Telenko continues, Western intelligence insistence on 1 Russian death per 4 wounded is very much an example of where the failure to accept reality lives. It's better for an intelligence analyst's career to be wrong in a crowd than correct and be alone. 21st century drone warfare is different from traditional 20th century land combat. It's simply far more accurate and kills more people with fewer shells. It has different casualty ratios to match. And he goes on. But he says virtually no Ukrainian artillery shell nor mortar shell fired on the Ukrainian front lines has been unobserved. Even the automatic grenade launchers are firing as drone observed indirect fire with matching videos. And just to kind of support that in a sense, Thomas Tyner, who's a really good, credible source himself, has done a back of a cigarette packet calculation here. He says Ukraine says it's trained 10,000 plus drone operators. Let's assume every 4th is trained to drop grenades on Russians. That's 2,500 that fly around 5 times a day to drop grenades on Russians. That's 12,500 grenades a day, or 87,500 grenades a week. He goes on to say there are at maximum 200,000 Russians on the front lines, likely less by now, as 1 to 2,000 Russians get killed every week. Even if Ukraine drops just 20,000 grenades per week, no Russian soldier can spend a second without fear of Ukrainian drones. An excellent way to demoralize them. I talked about this actually last week when I was speaking about the news of 10,000 drone operators coming out. And it just must be horrific psychologically to think that you're never safe. You're always looking up. You're always wondering what's in the skies. But just in terms of numbers, we are seeing that a huge amount of drone operation taking place at the moment, and it, when people are saying I've seen 100 to 100 to 120 people die on camera just last night, then you start to understand these figures a little bit better. Right, moving on to other things. This is a Ukrainian Stormer HVM. This is a short range air defense system, and this has been taken out by a loitering drone, another Lancet drone finding its victim here. And this is a bit of a shame, really. Ukrainians will need these kind of bits of kit, and Lancet drones are still a problem. As you can see, they realize it's coming and manage to get out. I don't know how well they survive though. Here we have a Ukrainian Tochka U missile. This is a big bit of kit. What's interesting here is it appears it's just stopped it's a very foggy day, but stopped the general traffic on the road. So we've seen this with HIMARS before. I've not seen it with the Tochka U, which is a big rocket being sent somewhere. So the Ukrainians are still operating these Tochka U. It was thought that they'd run out of these earlier in the war, but evidently not. And we have had evidence of them using them previously. I've shown you some footage of them and the damage they've done to Russian targets. Right. Last night was a big night for the air defenses around Kyiv particularly, but around Ukraine, Odessa as well. So last night, Russia launched 35 Iranian-made Shahed 136 and 131 one-way attack drones from Bryansk Oblast. And I think they were all of those were sent against Kyiv, and they were all shot down. So all 35 were shot down. However, they still cause quite a lot of damage in being shot down, and that's a bit of a problem. According to Kyiv City Military Administration, the wreckage of the downed Shaheeds injured 5 people, damaged an apartment block, a dozen cars, 15 trucks, and a gas pipe. Meanwhile, a Kh-22 Russian missile hit a warehouse of a food company in Odessa district, causing a massive fire. Air Command says Russia's Tu or Tu-22 M3 bombers launched 8 missiles from Crimea's Cape Tarkhan-Kut area to Odessa. Some didn't reach their targets. Slightly less information about what happened in Odessa. If some didn't reach their targets, that means probably most did. The question is, what are those targets? We probably won't hear about it because Ukraine are pretty good at keeping operational security around Russian successes. So yeah, Odessa might have been hit, but certainly in Kyiv, there's a lot of footage going around at the moment. Here is the footage of a drone. You can hear they sound like mopeds. You can hear the drones in the evening there, and then different types of air defenses being used. There's explosion in the clouds there. It's very difficult, of course, when you can't see them either. And then another an air defense missile looking to hit, or as this source says, it may be missed and then self-destructed itself rather than coming down as a missile. So he says this honestly looks like more like an air defense missile that has gone off target, self-destructing so that it doesn't hit any residential buildings, because it went up and then it came down and then exploded. But either way, all of those Shaheeds were taken out last night. There's other footage of the skies above Kyiv. It was, yeah, pretty hairy in Kyiv, because those, as I said, those missiles and shrapnel and exploded Shahed drones still have to come down somewhere. Russia fired up to 8 obsolete Kh-22s, Soviet Kh-22 cruise missiles on Odessa from strategic aircraft. Well, they may be obsolete, but they are still doing damage, right? According to spokesman Yuri Ikhnat, a food warehouse and a recreation area in the Black Sea coast were hit. I presume a few other military targets might well have been hit as well. And then going on to OSINT Defender here, says initial reports that a Russian missile strike on the southern Odessa region has targeted and destroyed the Pidomny Mist Bridge between the settlements of Zatoka and Karolina Bohaz on the waterway between the Dnipro River estuary and the Black Sea. And they say they hit a store of Western equipment there. That's what the Russians have said. So it could well be that was one of the the targets taken out by the Russian missile attack. Russian media report that they hit the Shkolny airfield in Odessa as well as Zatoka. That's been hit before, that airfield, which links the two parts of the region and the district of Dachny just outside of Odessa. So it looks like Odessa might have had some serious hits from the Russians there. Russia's claimed it destroyed a crucial part of Kyiv's air defenses. Now I'm trying to make sense of this. There's zero evidence of the claim that a Lancet drone hit the American Avenger systems. Avengers are short-range missile systems, basically a bunch of stingers on the back of a Humvee type thing. But to be hit by Lancet in Kyiv, I'm sure Lancets can't get all the way to Kyiv. So I don't know what's going on with that claim. Kremlin says the Pentagon recently sent the Avengers specifically to protect against drones, which, yeah, true. The Russian Ministry of Defense, alongside Sevastopol regional officials, have stated, so this is referring to not last night, but the night before, claimed that a night attack of at least 22 drones was entirely destroyed by electronic warfare and air defense systems, with some crashing outside the city. So 22 drones of the Ukrainians 2 nights ago going into Crimea, particularly Sevastopol here, were all taken out by the air defenses. That's what the Russians are claiming. I can't verify that either way. You can see that the Russians are claiming that they are having a 100% success rate against the Ukrainian drones. To go on to a slightly different subject, near Moscow, we've got someone has lit another railway relay box. This has happened previously, but I haven't seen that for a good month or two now. But I'm sure that sort of activity is taking place fairly regularly. Now, talking about fires, this is a massive fire breaking out in Moscow at the construction site of a residential complex, Nove Ochakove. Video. This video is doing the rounds. It is, I don't know what is burning, but something is burning badly. So that is in Russia, in Moscow. Another kind of Russia on fire video. And we carry on. Goodness me, the fires in Sverdlovsk are absolutely catastrophic there. So also in Sverdlovsk, I mean, I could show you a bunch of bits of footage, but just to pick a few, further south on the road neighboring Kurgan Oblast, this is an apocalyptic scene. Many houses there already said to be on fire too. Tyumen is another nearby region, also in a state of emergency due to the fire. What is the fire service doing, says this video. But as I've said before, much of the fire service operations were carried out by conscripts, and the conscripts are, somewhat busy with a war. So that is that, and you can see the apocalyptic images coming from these fires in Russia, just absolutely insane. And another village in Russia burns down. A school and at least 20 houses, the same footage from before, but it's just a bit more detail. A school and at least 20 houses are on fire now in the village of Yuldus in the Kurgan region. Crowds watch helplessly. Pretty terrible, and a bit more footage from outside of there as well. Let's move to odds and sods here. A bit of military news. So Prigozhin has now said that he has been promised by the defense ministry all the weapons needed to continue fighting. Who knew? The Bakhmut withdrawal appears to be cancelled. I was saying that this could well happen. Indeed, he appears to have got angry enough with the Russian MOD and done enough threatening. He's got a bit of leverage with, I guess, the Chechens saying, well, we're gonna a bit of leverage with saying he's going to pull out of Bakhmut, which is potentially the only area of success for the Russians. So the Russian MOD have capitulated and given Prigozhin what he wants, so he's not going to leave. But it may be that they're getting Chechens in to support them there as well. There is some video footage of some Chechens getting prepared to help in Bakhmut. Okay. During the night, fleets of evacuation buses were seen leaving occupied Zaporizhia. Where's Russia taking these citizens of Ukraine? The exiled mayor of Enerhodar has said there is no sign of forced evacuation there yet. But there was news of 18 different settlements being evacuated by the Russians in advance of the coming counter-offensive. And just a bit of news. This is before and after photos of a Ukrainian POW that was released from Russian jail yesterday, and you can see the difference. This is Yevhen Chudnitsov, a POW for a second time, having been captured in 2015 as well. During his captivity, he claims his teeth were knocked out. So here he was before, and here he is now. That is quite some difference. Okay, moving on to military aid. We have Turkey refusing to hand over S-400 air defense systems to Ukraine at the request of the US. The head of the Turkish Foreign Ministry told the Haberturk TV channel. Now, the states offered Turkey to hand over complexes to Ukraine to protect the sky, but the offer was rejected. It says an offer. I don't know what the US were going to be doing in exchange, or whether it's just a please can you hand these over type affair. Turkey also refused to give the US access to the systems for their study. So, yeah, that's the S-400, which is a upgraded version of S-300 air defense surface-to-air missile system. It would be very useful for the Ukrainians to have that, but obviously the Turks don't want to get rid of their own. They've got their own needs and their own reasons for that, no doubt. Ukraine began to receive radars for a new missile threat warning system. The Israeli company Radar Electronic Industries produces radars. Israel Defense reports Ukraine should receive a batch of 16 radar radars. They will be used to detect and warn of missile attacks. The publication notes that the transfer of such radars requires the approval of the MOD of Israel. And this is Tendar's comment on this. It was an open secret that Israel was quietly supplying military equipment to Ukraine. And here we have a very good example. 16 of these radars, which are funded by Lithuania, interesting, will be transferred to Ukraine. Quote, the IEH-MHR radar is a tactical three-dimensional radar that is capable of detecting even small targets in the scanning area. It provides the operator of the system with information about the position and altitude of the detected flying objects. According to the manufacturer, the radar is able to work effectively in conditions in active radio electronic interference. That is fairly significant. So fantastic if Israel can provide them. Now, the Fuchs and Boxer APCs. I was speaking to someone recently who'd driven Fuchs before, said they were good. There is negotiation between Ukraine and Germany about the provision of those. No detail other than that. But apparently, Ukraine have at least a couple of these, I think, from what I can work out. It's a huge bit of kit, as it says here. Tatra, this is from the Czech Republic. Tatra T8157V 8x8 recovery vehicle of the Czech Armed Forces, nicknamed the Mammoth. The beast weighs 38 tons and is used for recovery of damaged or stuck vehicles. It can also do some engineered terrain adjustments. Mammoth is equipped with 2 winches that have traction force of 24 tons each, and 1 2-ton winch that has a 220-meter long rope. It's also equipped with HIAB crane that has a max load capacity of 44 tons. Pretty powerful. Mammoth is able to recover and evacuate all trucks and light armored 4x4 vehicles in service of the Czech Armed Forces. Same goes for our Panda 2CZ infantry fighting vehicles. Thanks to its power, it will also be capable of doing its job with heavier 8x8 IFVs or even some tracked platforms. On drawbar, it can tow vehicles that weigh up to 57 tons, or it can use its rear transportation fork that has a load capacity of 14 tons. And this thing is pretty capable. Its crew is protected by level 2B armored cabin, and it's able to go up to 105 kilometers per hour and has a range of 630 kilometers. Mammoth can also do some limited repairs to damaged vehicles, thanks to it being geared up with all-round set of tools and technology. Mammoth works in tandem with T8157D, which is a dedicated workshop repair special used for substantial field repairs. Both Mammoth and the 8157D are built on the proven Tatra 8157 chassis, making them very capable in hard terrain. I think they've been given out to a couple of both of these products are of the Czech defense industry and are being used by the 41st, 42nd Mechanized Battalions and 44th Light Motorized Battalions etc., etc., etc. So yeah, this will be really useful for the Ukrainians. I don't know how many they are getting and where they are, but it appears that they are getting those. That's really good news. On slightly different subject, autonomous weaponry, or I don't know, remote control weaponry. It's slightly different, isn't it? A machine gun on a Ukrainian experimental self-propelled remotely controlled platform being tested on the range. We've seen a few of these sorts of vehicles and bits of kit being tested. We've not seen any of them being utilized on the front line, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that goes. We have, I think this is super, super interesting. So some footage has come out of the Ukrainians training on crossing rivers, and not only personnel crossing rivers in these really large amphibious vehicles, but also the idea that these vehicles can carry other vehicles, as you'll see. I think it's a Humvee that gets carried across in another one of these. Yeah, there it is. Means that you might not need bridges to get at least some light equipment across if you can use these bits of kit. Um, does this have significance for the Dnipro River? I don't know, but they're certainly training on this equipment. Likewise, they are training with pontoon bridges. Now, these would be useful all over the place because there are a number of rivers that they might have to cross, given where their counteroffensive might take place. So that is obviously incredibly useful for them to train up on doing that. On the other hand, Russian Tornado GMLRS has been seen with roof screens. So this is, I've been talking a lot about how vehicles need protection from loitering munitions. We are seeing the Russians starting to put their own. I guess these are more useful than the kind of cope cages we've seen on tanks. The loitering munitions are a problem. I mean, it's whether the FPV drones have got the ability to kind of go under these cages rather than just being a top attack thing. You can get them to hit at the side. So I don't know how. I suppose these are going to be useful to a degree. It's definitely. I mean, I think every vehicle should have loitering munition protection pretty much. And here we see a Switchblade 600, which the American kamikaze drones that are anti-armor drones. So they've got fairly decent. They're like a Javelin ATGM, and this one was caught in a net and reportedly stopped by a net on a Russian OSA air defense system. Exactly what I was saying. Every air defense system needs some kind of protection from loitering munitions, and here we see a Switchblade 600 caught up in that net and failing to do the damage it was intended to do. Okay, right. A few bits on the geopolitics front. A leaked document reveals that Russian intelligence services have arranged fake protests in Europe inspired by the Quran burnings to provoke Erdogan. I'm publishing a new investigation today, says Kevin Shakir, with the Dossier Center and several European media outlets. So just to summarize what he's found, on March the 5th, 2023, members of the Ukrainian community held a protest at Saint Place Pierre in Paris, in France, according to the intel documents. What seems to be a Nazi protest insulting Turkey is a Russian operation, including fake and not Ukrainian protester, according to our research. So here's a guy doing a Nazi salute with the Ukrainian flag, slagging off Erdogan. And you're wondering, really, is that really what you're doing? One of the leaked documents describes an increase in Islamophobic sentiments in Europe, referring to Rasmus Paludan's Quran burning. So this is a guy that burnt a Quran in Sweden ahead of ahead of a foreign minister from Sweden traveling to Turkey. That had to be banned, and indeed, Turkey have not yet allowed Sweden to join NATO, partly on the back of this. And it's thought that that was actually kind of paid for by the Russians, as I reported on previously. Or it says of those burnings, it goes to suggest that insulting Erdogan and stomping on a Turkish flag in cities such as Paris, Brussels, and Hague. And here's an image from Paris, so talking about graffiti and posters that appear to be done by the Russians. Not only is content from the fake protest in Paris shared on social media, it gets published in a Turkish media outlet 1 week after the Russian operation was held. The author is related to the Russian state media Komsomolskaya Pravda. The content from the fake protests has been shared on TikTok, Telegram, YouTube, and Facebook. It's been spread in Facebook groups with hundreds of thousands of members altogether. We've identified two men behind several profiles who live in St. Petersburg. Uh, we have identified one Moroccan citizen and one Algerian citizen behind several social media profiles combined on Facebook and YouTube that has spread content from the Russian campaign against Erdogan. They live in St. Petersburg, where they moved to study a few years ago. When investigating the North African social media posts, we found several demonstrations in several European cities that sources link to the same Russian intelligence service. Here are the images from scare quotes protests in different countries with the same messages and same misspellings. Um, the fake demonstrators join a legitimate demonstration. This I found quite interesting, such as one against pension reform in Paris or a climate demonstration in Hague. The protest is filmed and posted on social media. So the idea is it makes these protests look far bigger than they really are. All the people behind you might think are at the same protest, but actually, no, they've just hijacked another much bigger protest and made this seem bigger than it is. And then it gets put on social media outside of that country and no one really verifies. And it gets shared and spread, so on and so forth. It portrays a huge European movement against Zelensky. And he says more on this coverage later as he writes about it elsewhere. The Russian government has not responded to our request for comments, of course. I've been in dialogue with the North African men who deny ties to the Russian intelligence and the sharing of the content. The Moroccan claims his profiles were hacked. Their profiles were deleted after I spoke to them. And he goes on as an extra one. He says at least 10 anti-Ukrainian demonstrations in European cities are now being linked to the Russian intelligence service. Today, we reveal the second part of our investigation of fake protests in Europe, and he's got a new article out. So I find that fascinating and not at all surprising. And you may think it's very small, and probably that's a really small and easy to organise thing. This all of this doesn't take an awful lot of thought, but the damage perhaps it can do in terms of being shared, causing issues. So with regard to the Erdogan situation, if that's getting shared enough, then people had this idea that there's this issue between maybe Ukraine and Erdogan, or and that will that affect the coming Turkish elections? Who knows? But I guess it's low cost, low risk, high reward potentially. And indeed, Russian intelligence planned and executed anti-Erdogan demonstrations in Europe aimed at sowing division between Turkey and the EU and to hinder NATO expansion. And I presume that's referring to the same data and the same sources as I've just shared with you. And that is a report coming out. This is in Expressen, which is that Swedish newspaper. So anyway, yeah, these sort of things are happening, and don't be surprised that it appears. I mean, it certainly appears that this is Russia doing its thing, that we are very used to. Transnistria asked Russia to increase the number of peacekeepers. That's Russian peacekeepers. The head of the representative office of the PMR in the Russian Federation, Leonid Manakov, said Manakov believes that the increase is justified, taking into account the growing security risks. So, just to let you know, Transnistria is there. It's that annexed region bordering Ukraine, just on the east of the Moldovan border. And that is controlled by the Russians. There's about 1,500 Russian troops there, I think. Anyway, there's been all sorts of anti-EU, anti-Moldovan government sentiments being whipped up in protests in Moldova that have been directly orchestrated by the Kremlin. We've seen people that have been shipped in, Russians. There was one Russian kid that was interviewed about the protests he's involved in, and they said, blah 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 in Romanian. And he's like, "Oh, sorry, I don't speak Romanian. I only speak Russian." It's like, is just basically just been shipped over to take part in these protests. So again, going back to what I was previously saying here, Russia are very good at fomenting discord in Europe and elsewhere. Anyway, that's today's news. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the time you spend on my channel. Look out for my frontline update coming out a little bit later. It's going to be a little bit of a busy morning, but I'll see if I can get that done as soon as possible. And in the meantime, toodle pips.